Today we are going to talk about analyzing qualitative data. Here you can see the expected learning outcomes. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to understand the nature of qualitative data and appreciate the implications of these for your analysis. Able to evaluate different approaches to analyze your qualitative data. Also, you should be able to identify the main issues that you need to consider when preparing your qualitative data for analysis. Then you also should be able to transcribe recorded interview or notes of an interview or observation and create a data file for analysis by computer. Also, you should be aware of different analytical aids to help you to analyze your qualitative data, including keeping a reflective or reflexive journal. Also, you should be able to select an appropriate analytical technique for your research project to undertake qualitative data analysis. We are going to start from introduction. This lecture is designed to help you analyze qualitative data. The nature of qualitative data is discussed in section 2. Following this, we discuss two important aspects related to the nature of qualitative analysis in section 3. The first of these relates to whether you approach your qualitative data analysis from a deductive or inductive perspective. The second relates to the interactive nature of qualitative data collection and analysis. As you read through the sections of this lecture, you recognize the interrelated and interactive nature of qualitative data collection and analysis. Because of this, it will be necessary to plan your qualitative research as an interconnected process where you collect and begin to analyze and interpret data as you undertake each interview or observation. So the next is the nature of qualitative data. It is helpful to commence our discussion by understanding what we mean by qualitative data. Understanding qualitative data will help you to analyze these meaningfully. We recognize that qualitative research is often associated with an interpretivist philosophy because researchers need to make sense of the subjective and socially constructed meanings expressed by those who take part in research about the phenomenon being studied. Qualitative data are likely to be characterized by their richness and fullness, based on the opportunity to explore a subject in as real manner as is possible. A further way to understand qualitative data is distinguish them from quantitative data. The next table will highlight three distinct differences between quantitative and qualitative data. In qualitative research, meanings are principally derived from words and images, not numbers. Since words and images may have multiple meanings as well as unclear meanings, it is necessary to explore and clarify these with great care. This indicates that the quality of qualitative research depends on the interaction between data collection and data analysis to allow meanings to be explored and clarified. The nature of qualitative data has further implications for their analysis. These non-standard data will be likely to be large in volume and complex in nature. You will therefore be confronted by either a mass of paper, still images, visual recordings, or electronic files that you will need to explore, analyze, and transform in order to address your research objectives and answer your research questions. While it might be possible to make some use of diagrams and statistics at this stage, such as the frequency of occurrence of certain categories of data, we are going to discuss it in section 4, the way in which you are likely to analyze the qualitative data that you collect is through the development of research-specific concepts that you may link into a conceptual framework. This framework may be developed before, during, or after your data collection and then refined as your research progresses. These analytical processes are discussed in much greater details in next sections. As we noted earlier, it is important to understand the nature of qualitative analysis before embarking on its use. In this section, we consider two aspects related to the nature of qualitative analysis: your approach to analysis and the interactive nature of qualitative research. Let's start from deciding on your approach to analysis. Research commences from either a deductive or an inductive approach. Where you commence your research project using a deductive approach, you seek to use existing theory to shape the qualitative research process and aspects of your data analysis. Where you commence your research project using an inductive approach, you seek to build up a theory that is adequately grounded in your data. In this section, we discuss the difference between using theory at the start of your research to analyze qualitative data and commencing your research by collecting and exploring your data without a predetermined theoretical or descriptive framework. Let's start from using a deductive approach. In his article in 2014, suggests that where you have made use of existing theory to formulate your research question and objectives, you may also use the theoretical propositions that helped you do this as a means to devise a framework to help you to organize and direct your data analysis. There is a debate about this approach when applied to a qualitative analysis because this theoretical framework may be too restrictive in relation to the issues revealed in the data and fail to allow the meanings expressed by research participants to be explored adequately. If this occurs when you use a theoretical framework to design and analyze your research, you need to adapt your approach. Here you can see some example. Please take your time to read it carefully. Now it's time to see how to use an inductive approach. The alternative to a deductive approach is an inductive one, so it is to start to collect data and then explore them to see which themes or issues to follow up and concentrate on. An inductive approach may be a difficult strategy to follow and may not lead to success for someone who is an experienced researcher. This is likely to happen where you simply go ahead and collect data without examining them to assess which themes are emerging from the data as you progress. The use of inductive approach may involve you in a lengthy period of concurrent data collection and analysis in order to research an issue or topic adequately or to derive a well-grounded theory. Consequently, while you may commence with either an inductive or deductive approach, in practice, your research is likely to combine elements of both of them. The interactive nature of the process. Data collection, data analysis, and the development and verification of propositions are very much an interrelated and interactive set of processes in qualitative research. Analyses are undertaken during the collection of data as well as after it. This analysis helps to shape the direction of data collection, especially where you are following a more inductive, grounded approach. The interactive nature of data collection and analysis allows you to recognize important themes, patterns, and relationships as you collect data. In other words, to allow this to emerge from the process of data collection and analysis, you need to make it simultaneously. As part of this, you will need to recategorize and recode your existing data to see where the emergent themes, patterns, and relationships are present, in the cases where you have already collected data. The concurrent process of data collection and analysis also has implications for the way in which you manage your time and organize your data and related documentation. It will be necessary to arrange interviews or observations with enough space between them to allow yourself sufficient time to write up or word process a transcript or set of notes, and to analyze these before proceeding to your next data collection session. There is a clear limit to the value of continuing to undertake interviews or observations without properly analyzing these in this way. There is a danger of data overload where you continue to collect data without sufficiently analyzing this. Now we have reached the section number 4, preparing your data for analysis. Qualitative data can be generated in many forms. We considered archival and documentary research. We considered secondary data. We also highlighted how documentary data were available in a range of written and non-written forms. We considered how observation may be video recorded, in addition to being recorded using an observation schedule or by taking notes. It is important to emphasize the importance of copying any recordings you make and transcribing both these and your notes to ensure data are not lost. In this section, we focus upon the conversion of qualitative data from oral or handwritten form to word-processed text, as this is the way that you are most likely to use this in your analysis. Let's talk about transcribing qualitative data. The interview is often audio recorded and subsequently transcribed, that is reproduced verbatim as a word-processed account. We also emphasized that as an interviewer, you would be interested not only in what participants said, but in the way they said it as well. This means that the task of transcribing audio-recorded interviews is likely to be time-consuming, as you will need not only to record exactly what was said and why and by whom, but also try to give an indication of the tone in which it was said and the participants' nonverbal communications. Most research methods texts suggest that it takes a touch typist between 6 and 10 hours to describe every hour of audio recording. Alternative ways of reducing the time needed to transcribe audio recordings is to hire someone to help you. So there are some options that will be shown to you on the next slide. Transcribing audio recordings. When transcribing audio recordings or your own notes, you need to plan in advance how you intend to analyze your transcriptions. If you only have access to a black and white printer, there is a little point in using different colored fonts to distinguish between participants in a group interview or to distinguish nonverbal responses, such as nervous laughter, in your transcripts, as this will be difficult to discern when working from the paper copies. So that's why I recommend you to develop your own system of codes, and some of them were also given to you in the previous table. For some forms of textual data, such as, for example, email interviews or electronic versions of documents, including organizational emails, blogs, and web-based reports, your data may already be in electronic format. Although these data have already been captured electronically, you are still likely to need to spend some time preparing them for analysis. This is likely to involve you ensuring that, when necessary, the data are, so there are three requirements. So the data should be suitable, such as by using separate codes for yourself and different participants. It should be appropriately stored for analysis, for example, one file for each interview, each meeting's minutes, or each organizational policy. And free of typographical errors that you may have introduced, and where these occurred, they have been cleaned up. In addition to transcribing your notes and audio or digital recordings, it will also help your analysis if you record contextual information about the interviews or observations that you conduct. This will help you to recall the context and content of each interview or observation, as well as informing your interpretation, as you will be more likely to remember the precise conditions of your data collection. Various researchers have suggested ways of recording information and developing reflective ideas to supplement your written-up notes or transcripts and your categories data. On the next slide, they will be given to you. These are interim or progress summaries, transcript summaries, document summaries, self-memos, a research notebook, a reflective diary or journal. Let's start from interim or progress summaries. As your analysis progresses, you may wish to write an interim summary of your progress to date. You may decide to write an interim summary after each interview or observation, or after a set of related interviews or observations. Then, transcript summaries. After you have written up your notes or produced a transcript of an interview or observation session, you can also produce a summary of the key points that have emerged from undertaking this activity. A transcript summary compresses long statements into briefer ones in which the main sense of what has been said or observed is rephrased in a few words. Through summaries, you'll become conversant with the principal themes that have emerged from each interview or observation. Document summaries. Where you use any sort of documentation, it is helpful to produce a document summary. A document summary may fulfill two purposes. It may be used to summarize and list the document's key points for your research. These points become part of your data set. Secondly, you may use it to describe the purpose of the document, how it relates to your work, and why it is significant. Self-memos allow you to record ideas that occur to you about any aspect of your research, as you think of them. Where you omit to record any ideas as it occurred to you, it may well be forgotten. Ideas may also occur as you engage in an interview or observation session. In this case, you might record the idea very briefly as a margin note and write it as a memo to yourself after the event. Research Notebook. An alternative approach to recording your ideas about your research is to keep a research notebook. You may of course keep such a notebook alongside the creation of self-memos. Its purpose will be similar to the creation of them: to record your ideas and reflections, and to act as an aid memo about your intentions for the direction of your research. Using a chronological format may help you to identify the development of certain ideas. Reflective diary or journal. Reflection may occur in a number of ways. It may occur during an event, so that you reflect on your approach while you're conducting an activity. This type of reflection may occur, for example, while you're interviewing or observing. Reflection may also occur after an activity has taken place, so that you reflect on what occurred and how you might be able to do better next time. Now we have reached the section number 6, Thematic Analysis. We start by outlining thematic analysis, as this is often thought of as a generic approach to analyzing qualitative data. Brown and Clark in 2006 referred to thematic analysis as a foundational method for qualitative analysis. Thematic analysis involves a researcher coding her or his qualitative data to identify themes or patterns for further analysis related to his or her research question. Thematic Analysis Introduction. Thematic analysis can be used to analyze large qualitative data sets as well as smaller ones, leading to rich descriptions, explanations, and theorizing. Thematic analysis can be used to help you in 6 cases. Comprehend often large and disparate amounts of qualitative data. Integrate related data drawn from different transcripts and notes. Identify key themes or patterns from a data set for further exploration. To produce a thematic description of this data. To develop and test explanations and theories based on apparent thematic patterns or relationships, and to draw and verify conclusions. Now we are going to outline the procedures used in thematic analysis. The following procedures provide a set of guidelines to undertake thematic analysis. In practice, these procedures do not occur in a simple linear progression. Instead, they are often concurrent and recursive, involving you analyzing data as you collect them and going back over earlier data and analysis as you refine the way in which you code and categorize newly collected data and search for analytical themes. The procedures outlined here involve becoming familiar with your data, coding your data, searching for themes and recognizing relationships, refining themes and testing propositions. Now we are going to consider each of these. Becoming familiar with your data. You will start to become familiar with your data as you produce transcripts of the interviews or observations you conduct. The act of transcribing a data item yourself allows you to develop familiarity. This should also prompt you to generate summaries, self-memos, or entries in your notebook or diary that aid your analysis. Familiarization with your data involves a process of immersion that continues throughout your research project. You need to read and read your data during your analysis. You will be interested to look for meanings, recurring themes, and patterns in your data. Without familiarity, you will not be able to engage in the analytical procedures that follow. Producing transcripts and data familiarization are therefore important elements in analyzing your data. Coding your data is the second step. Coding is used to categorize data with similar meanings. Coding involves labeling each unit of data within a data item with a code that symbolizes or summarizes that extracts meaning. A code is a single word or a short phrase which may also be abbreviated in use. A coded extract of data is referred to as a unit of data. A unit of data may be a number of words, a line of a transcript, a sentence, a number of sentences, a complete paragraph, other chunk of textual data, or image that is summed up by a particular code. If you think that a new piece of data has a similar meaning to a previously coded unit of data, it should be labeled with the same code. If you think that a new piece of data doesn't have a similar meaning to a previously coded unit of data, you will need to devise a new code for it. The next slide illustrates this approach. Searching for themes and recognizing relationships. This is seen as a distinct stage of analysis that follows coding, although in practice, you will be searching for themes, patterns, and relationships in your data as you collect and code them. Producing progress summaries, transcript summaries, document summaries, self-memos, or other entries in your research notebook and reflective diary will help you to record your ideas about possible themes, patterns, and relationships in your data. The search for themes fully begins when you have coded all of your data set. At this point, you have a long list of codes that you have created to make sense of and draw meaning from your data. Advice about the number of codes you might be working with at this point varies considerably. Some advice refers to working with up to 30 codes, so 30 is a maximum number. This stage of analysis involves you searching for patterns and relationships in your long list of codes to create a short list of themes that relate to your research question. A theme is a broad category incorporating several codes that appear to be related to one another and which indicates an idea that is important to your research question. A theme may also be a single code or which indicates an idea that assumes general importance to your research question and is therefore elevated to become a theme. As you search these codes, some initial questions you may ask include this. What are the key concepts in these codes? What, if anything, seems to be recurring in these codes? What seems to be important, whether it occurs often or not? What patterns and trends are evident in the coded data? Which codes appear to be related? And how do a particular set of codes appear to be related? As you start to decide on themes to analyze your data further, some additional questions you may ask are shown on the screen. What is the essence of each apparent theme? How might themes be related to each other? Which themes appear to be main themes and which appear to be sub-themes, or related to the main one? How may the relationship between themes be represented to produce a thematic map? Is there an overarching theme that unites your analysis? So these are the questions that you can use to further investigation of your data. You shouldn't expect this process to be unproblematic. In attempting to achieve a thorough understanding of your data set, some further questions you might ask include: how well does this initial thematic map represent the relationships between themes? Which themes, if any, do not fit within this thematic representation? Does the way the data have been coded need to be revised? If so, which data and how? Which items need to be refined, discarded, and newly introduced? How may the semantic representation be modified to represent my data better? In the first set of questions, you begin to decide on themes to further your analysis. In the second set of questions, you begin to define your themes and the relationships between them. Refining themes and the relationships between them is likely to be an important part of your analytical process. The themes that you devise need to be part of a coherent set so that they will provide you with a well-structured analytical framework to pursue your analysis. As you seek to reveal patterns within your data and to recognize relationships between themes, you will be able to develop testable propositions. The appearance of an apparent relationship or connection between themes will need to be tested if you are to be able to conclude that there is an actual relationship. The information on the next slide will help you to understand this. The next is evaluation. Thematic analysis offers a systematic approach to qualitative data analysis that is accessible and flexible. Compared to some qualitative approaches, it's not overly prescriptive about the application of its analytical procedures. As a generic approach to qualitative data analysis, it is suitable to use with several qualitative research strategies, where you are not following a named version of a strategy that prescribes precise analytic procedures as in grounded theory method described earlier in the previous lecture. Thematic analysis may also be used in relation to deductive and inductive research approaches. Using a purely deductive or inductive research approach may be problematic, affecting the scope of the analysis. Semantic analysis allows the researcher to move between these approaches. Now we have reached the section number 7, Template Analysis. Template analysis is a type of thematic analysis with a few key differences. In thematic analysis, all data items are coded first before the search for themes fully begins. In template analysis, a researcher only codes a proportion of the data items before developing an initial list of codes and themes known as a coding template. This coding template is a hierarchical list of codes and themes which is used as a central analytical tool in template analysis. A researcher using template analysis will start by coding a sufficient part of their data to develop an initial coding template. This may mean coding the first interview or observation transcript, or a number of these in order to be able to develop a set of initial codes. These codes are then arranged and rearranged until a satisfactory initial template is developed. Subsequent transcripts are then coded using the codes in this initial template, which is modified as new data suggests deficiencies in the codes being used, leading eventually to the development of a final coding template. So we provide further information on the procedures involved in this approach in the next subsection. Like thematic analysis, template analysis is a standalone analytical technique rather than being part of a wider methodological approach. As a consequence, it may be used irrespective of whether you are adopting an objectivist or subjectivist position, or whether you adopt a deductive or inductive research approach. So the next slide is going to illustrate how the codes can be developed, the initial template codes. Box on the next slide shows how the codes in the initial coding template from the box on the previous slide were altered as the process of data collection and analysis progressed. Several codes have been deleted and new ones inserted that better reflect the terms used in the data by participants. Some initial codes have been merged as well. For example, the original second-level code Reasons for Campaign has been merged with the first-level code Contextual Factors to form a new first-level code perceiving the need for the campaign. The original second-level codes like Media and Coverage have both been reclassified to become first-level codes. As a result of this reclassification, the scope of these themes has been enlarged and the new subsidiary codes created to encompass this. So the next slide will illustrate the updated coding scheme or coding template. The final part of template analysis description is evaluation. Like thematic analysis, template analysis offers a systematic, flexible, and accessible approach to analyze qualitative data. It adopts a higher level of structure earlier on than thematic analysis through the development of initial coding template. This may be preferred by some who like the idea of developing a very structured approach to analyzing their data earlier on. Others may prefer to code of their data first before playing around with the analytical structures. In my opinion, I recommend you to use the template analysis if you have options to choose between two of them. Now we have reached the section number 8, Explanation Building and Testing. In this section, we outline 3 techniques where the nature of reaching an explanation and theorizing may be differentiated from both thematic analysis and template analysis. In these 3 techniques, the emphasis is on building and testing an explanation. These techniques are analytic induction, deductive explanation building, and pattern matching. We are going to discuss each of these in turn. Analytic induction is an inductive version of explanation building. A key characteristic of this technique is that it uses an incremental approach to build and test an explanation or theory. Analytic induction seeks to develop and test an explanation by intensively examining the phenomenon being explored through the successive selection of purposive cases. This means that the process of collecting and analyzing data will be composed of a number of repeated steps to find a valid explanation of the phenomenon being studied. The next is procedure. Data will need to be collected from initial purposive case study, usually by conducting exploratory interviews or observations. This data should be analyzed to devise codes and themes and to recognize the relationships between them to develop an initial definition of a purposive that seeks to explain the phenomenon being studied. The last one is evaluation. As an inductive and incremental way of collecting and analyzing data qualitatively, this technique has a capability to lead to the development of well-grounded explanations. Analytic induction encourages the collection of data that are throughout and rich by exploring the actions and meanings of those who participate in this process, through in-depth interviews or observations, or some combination of these methods. In relation to analytic induction, you need to select your sample of cases with care to be able to demonstrate how they relate to the phenomenon you are studying. Then, selecting different cases related to the phenomenon being studied may also help to overcome issues related to theoretical generalizability. For instance, if you are seeking to explain how small enterprises respond to regulatory change, you could select a sample of cases from different business sectors and in relation to a range of regulatory changes where feasible. The next is deductive explanation building. This version of explanation building uses a deductive approach. It involves an incremental attempt to build an explanation by testing and refining a predetermined theoretical proposition. As with analytic induction, the process of collecting and analyzing data to understand the research topic or phenomenon will be composed of a number of repeated steps to find a valid explanation. The explanation building procedure follows these steps. There are 6 steps. First, devise a theoretically based proposition, which you then seek to test. Then undertake data collection through an initial purposive case study in order to be able to compare the findings from this in relation to your theoretically based proposition. Where necessary, amend the theoretically based proposition in the light of the findings from the initial case study. Then, select a further case study to undertake a further round of data collection in order to compare the findings from this in relation to the revised proposition. Where necessary, further amend the revised proposition in the light of the findings from the second case study. Then undertake further iterations of this process until a satisfactory explanation is derived. The next is pattern matching. Pattern matching involves predicting a pattern of outcomes based on theoretical propositions to explain what you expect to find from analyzing your data. Using this approach, you need to develop a conceptual or analytical framework utilizing existing theory. If the pattern of your data matches that which has been predicted through the conceptual framework, you have found an explanation, where possible threats to the validity of your conclusions can be discounted. We discuss examples related to two uses of this procedure that depends on whether you are matching patterns for the dependent or for the independent variable. Let's talk about procedure. As I mentioned earlier, there are two options. So there are patterns for dependent and independent variables. Let's start from dependent. The first use is matching patterns for dependent variables arising from another independent variable. For example, based on theoretical propositions drawn from appropriate literature, you specify a number of related outcomes that you expect to find as a result of the implementation of a particular change management program in an organization where you intend to undertake the research. Having specified these expected outcomes, you then engage in the process of data collection and analysis. Where your predicted outcomes are found, it is likely that your theoretically based explanation is appropriate to explain your findings. If, however, you reveal one or more outcomes that have not been predicted by your explanation, you need to seek an alternative one. The second use is matching patterns for variables that are independent of each other. In this case, you would identify two or more alternative explanations to explain the pattern of outcomes that you expect to find. The box on the next slide will illustrate this. As a consequence, only one of these predicted explanations may be valid. If one explanation is found to explain your findings, then the other may be discarded. Where you find a match between one of these predicted explanations and the data you have collected and analyzed, you will have evidence to suggest that this is indeed an explanation for your findings. Further evidence that this is a correct explanation will flow from finding the same pattern of outcomes in other similar cases. So the next slide will illustrate these patterns. Evaluation. The use of predicted explanations should mean that the pathway to an answer to your research question and objectives is reasonably defined. The extent to which this is the case will depend on two factors: your level of skills in using existing theory to define clearly the theoretical propositions and conceptual framework that will guide you through a research project. And the second, the appropriateness of these theoretical propositions and the conceptual framework for the data that you reveal. Narrative analysis. What these analytical approaches have in common is the preservation of the data's narrative form. Unlike thematic analysis, template analysis, or grounded theory method, where original data are fragmented by coding and then assigned to analytical categories, narrative data are preserved and analyzed as a whole unit or narrative sequence. While a narrative tends to be analyzed as a whole, the nature of what constitutes a narrative varies considerably. Textual narratives may vary from a segment of text or speech to a whole life story provided by narrator. Thematic narrative analysis. The purpose of thematic narrative analysis is to identify analytical themes within narratives. This approach to narrative analysis focuses on the content of a narrative rather than the way in which it is structured. In this approach, the emphasis is therefore on what the narrative is about rather than how it is constructed. The next is structural narrative analysis. Structural narrative analysis analyzes the way in which a narrative is constructed. This approach to narrative analysis examines use of language to understand how it affects a listener or an audience. In this approach, the emphasis is therefore on how the narrative is constructed and language is used rather than what it is about. The final part is evaluation. Narrative research is a case-centered approach, and you may find that use of an action research, case study, documentary, ethnographic, or grounded theory research strategy will lead to the collection of narrative sequences that draw you towards the use of narrative analysis. The next is discourse analysis. Discourse analysis is a term covering a variety of approaches that analyze the social effects of the use of the language. In general terms, discourse refers to the spoken or written use of language, often referred to as talk or text. In discourse analysis, the emphasis is not on studying the way in which language is used for its own sake. Use of language is a key way in which people make sense of their social world. In this more specific sense, discourse describes how language is used to shape this meaning-making process, to construct social reality. A discourse is therefore not just seen as natural reflection, as social practice or relations, but as constructing these through the communication. In this way, discourse analysis explores how discourses construct or constitute social reality and social relations through creating meanings and perceptions. The next one is a content analysis and quantifying qualitative data. Content analysis is an analytical technique that codes and categorizes qualitative data in order to analyze them quantitatively. Content analysis has a long history that illustrates its use as an approach spanning qualitative and quantitative methods. There are a lot of definitions of content analysis which often draw on an early definition by Berelson from 1952. So, content analysis is a research technique for the objective, systematic and quantitative description of the manifest content of communication. This is an important definition because it includes key concepts that help us to understand this technique and differentiate it from other discussed earlier. These key concepts are objective, systematic, quantitative description, and manifest content. We consider each of these and other concepts to help you to explore content analysis as an analytical technique. Evaluation. While content analysis can be useful, it may also be problematic. Issues may arise when you seek to use content analysis in relation to documentary sources. In some situations, the documentary sources you wish to use for your data will be inaccessible, missing, incomplete, or unusable. This raises a general concern about the extent to which you should collect qualitative data in order to quantify them. As we have discussed, there are reasons why you may wish to code and categorize qualitative data in order to describe them quantitatively. But more generally, there is a limited purpose in collecting qualitative data if you intend to ignore the nature and value of this data by reducing most of them to a simplified form. In this way, content analysis may prove to be a main method when applied to documentary sources, but a secondary method when applied to qualitative data you collect yourself. So the next box from the next slide is going to illustrate that. The next method is data display and analysis. The data display and analysis approach is based on the work of Miles, published in 2014. The process of analysis consists of three concurrent sub-processes: data condensation, data display, and drawing and verifying conclusions. Data display. Data display involves organizing and assembling your data. Also describe a number of ways of displaying data and refer to two main families of data display: matrices and networks. Matrices are generally tabular in form with defined columns and rows where data are entered selectively into the appropriate cells of such as a matrix to facilitate further data analysis. Such example will be given to you on the next slide in the box. A network is a collection of nodes or boxes that are joined or linked by lines, perhaps with arrows to indicate the relationships. They look like a graph. The boxes or nodes contain brief descriptions or labels to indicate variables or key points from the data. So the information about data analysis will be given to you on the next slide in the box. Now we have reached the summary section. The first summary. Qualitative data are rich and full textual or visual data. A qualitative approach involves commencing your research from a deductive or inductive perspective. Data collection, analysis, and interpretation are very much an interrelated and interactive set of processes in qualitative research. Analysis occurs during the collection of data as well as after it. Qualitative data need to be carefully prepared for manual or computer-assisted analysis, usually involving transcription where the spoken word is involved. There are a number of aids that you might use to help you through the process of qualitative analysis, including interim summaries, event summaries, document summaries, self-memos, maintaining a research notebook, and keeping a reflective diary or reflexive journal. There are several different approaches to analyze your qualitative data. In this lecture, we discussed thematic analysis, template analysis, explanation building and testing, the ungrounded theory method, narrative analysis, discourse analysis, content analysis, and data display and other types of analysis. The use of computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software can help you during qualitative analysis with regard to project management and data organization. Keep it close to your data exploration, coding your data, and searching and integrating to build propositions and recording your thoughts systematically. Here you can see the self-check questions. There are 5 questions. Why do we describe qualitative analysis as an interactive process? Is the first question. Then, which source of data will you need to retain and file while you are undertaking qualitative research? How would you differentiate between a deductive and an inductive analytical approach? The question number 4. What are the main implications of using a deductive analytical approach for the way in which you conduct the process of qualitative analysis? And the last question. What are the main implications of using an inductive analytical approach for the way in which you conduct the process of a qualitative analysis? Take your time to provide your answers to these questions. Review and discussion question. Please visit one of the KAQDAS websites listed on page 74. Find and download a demonstrative version of the software package and explore its features. How useful do you think this will be for analyzing your research data? Thank you for your attention. In the end of this lecture, I would like to share a video from TED Talk conference with you.